During any given week at my school, 3 out of 10 students had a classroom tardy.
Kenny, why are you late to class?
And during any given week, we had at least 500 tardies school-wide. That's crazy. So last year, we decided to do something about it, and I'm glad to say we saw some huge changes. So what exactly did we do? Well, that is what this video is about. The first thing we did is we had the right mind frame. I go by something called the 10-80-10 rule. I apply this to my classroom, but also apply it to the school. I heard this on a podcast one time, and it goes like this, that 10% of the students or 10% of the people in a certain organization, students, are always going to do great. No matter what's going on, they're going to follow the rules, do what they need to do, and be awesome students, right? Regarding behavior. You're always going to have 10% that are always going to do something not up to par, right? And then you're going to have 80% that are kind of in the middle, and they're going to go one way or the other depending upon the culture, depending upon what's happening in the organization. So knowing this, going into trying to tackle this tardy problem with the 10-80-10 rule, we knew that 10% of students are always going to be in class on time and no problems at all. We knew that there's going to be about 10% of the students that no matter what we do are still going to be late. But it's that 80% in the middle that we want to make sure that we have going in the right direction. So going in to tackle this problem, we had a 10-80-10 rule, knowing that once again, that there's going to be a group of students, and if you really are on if you really are on sync, the school's doing what they need to do, and you're consistent with everything, that 10% actually might be reduced down to 5%. And that's what we kind of saw, is that we saw we even guided that 80% in the right direction, but even that 10% that always seemed to be tardy, some of them started getting on board. So when it was all said and done, the 10-80-10 rule is having realistic expectations, knowing that you're not going to get all the students on board. But if you get that 95% of students on task, your school is going to see a huge difference. So we went into it with the right mindset. That was the first thing we did. The second concept that we applied to tackle this problem of tardy was this, that it's not the magnitude of the consequence, it is the accountability. So here's what that means, that if you're trying to adjust student behavior, this applies to your classroom, applies to the school. It's not that you need huge consequences to alter negative behavior. What you need is consistent accountability. You need to hold students to a standard, but consistently hold them to that standard. And so what we adopted was this. We adopted the idea that if you are late to class, we said that 1 tardy equals 1 detention. And once again, 1 tardy equals 1 detention. So if you're late to a class, that results in a lunch detention. And we put a whole system together for this. It was, in my opinion, it was beautiful. We had about 23 or so staff working. Plus, we also had a cafeteria work, all to make this work. We actually collected the students. We actually walked them to get their lunch, actually had rooms where they go serve detention. I mean, we were on point, and it was beautiful. It was a really, really, really awesome system. But the key to that was the key to that was holding to that. If you're late to class, you have a detention. Because what happens is, if students are late to class, they know that there's a consequence coming their way, all right? And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It doesn't have to be like, suspension, nothing like that. And it's just that there has to be a consistent consequence to negative behavior. And so that is the one we chose. But once again, what made it work was the accountability part. Students knew that we're going to hold them accountable to that. Now, to give you the idea of the impact of this, it looks something like this. When we started, we had on average, once again, it varies a little bit per day and everything else, but we had about 120 tardies per day on average. 120 tardies per day on average. Now, sometimes more, sometimes less, but that's roughly where you're at. Now, once we apply this, and it took some time, right? Because students are, they're checking the boundaries, they're pushing the envelope a little bit to see if, as a staff, to see as a school, we're going to be consistent. But once we got consistent with it, within a matter of about 2 to 3 weeks, those numbers dropped dramatically. They went from about 120 tardies on average per day to about 50 tardies on average per day. That is a reduction of more than 50% and tardies. That's huge. That is huge. What changed? It's just the fact that we held students accountable to that. The third thing, the idea that we brought into it was this, that the small things will affect the big things. In my classroom, I call it the broken window idea, that if there's a broken window, you don't fix it, next thing you're gonna see that the rest of the house starts to deteriorate. In my classroom, I routinely clean my desk at least once a day at the end of the day, because if not, you're gonna see more and more things. The small things turn into big things if not addressed. So regarding tardies, the idea was this, that if we focus on tardies, if we take care of that small part of our overall discipline in our school, that you're gonna see effects, good effects, on other things, right? You're going to see a reduction in other negative behavior. Maybe something that happens in the bathroom, drugs, this and that, maybe fighting, everything else. So the hope was, by focusing on this one thing, tardies, a smaller thing, it's going to see bigger effects on the other issues at our school.